Hey, good morning. Audio check online from Rome.
Got you loud and clear, Ryan.
Good morning, audio check out there. Got us up.
Got you loud and clear, Ryan.
All right, cool. Thank you. So we're getting feedback here in the room, but just going to turn my speakers on mute. So good morning. Got a smaller audience today, which is cool. We're going to record this, post it out, and we're going to get going here with just talking through the 4.7 release cycle for the Tacx products. Mission and vision remain the same. We're here to empower tech users, whether those are operators at the front line or developers near and close to the Tech Product Center, or anybody in between. And we are continuing to pursue a vision of tech continuous delivery. You're going to see that reflected both in our updates and also kind of our forecast for the 4.8 release cycle. More on that in a second. So a few updates to our cadence. We've been planning this for several months now, at least a couple releases. We're going to pull our currently 4-month release cycle into a 3-month release cycle. That better aligns us with other government programs of record that use Tac, makes their planning cycles a bit more predictable. So you can expect the next release to hit the street in October of 2022. We are also making the 4.8 release of the Tacx products really heavy on quality. So we did a lot of planning this week on how to bolster our automated test of the products. We had a few quality escapes in the 4.6 release cycle. If you went from 4.6.1 to 4.6.11 to 4.6.12 to 4.6.13, you know what I'm talking about. But we aim to really make our products more stable and improve them where we can, and especially in that upgrade process. So look for the products to really feature or have far larger ads for the 4.8 cycle, and be focused, kind of internally on making those products better and better in terms of stability. And then we still are looking at TAC 5.0 for Q2 of fiscal year 23. So sometime next spring. More to follow on that as we get closer, kind of over the fall and into the early part of next year. But we're excited about TAC 5.0 and what that for the community. So today we're going to go through Atac 4.7. We'll hit Tacx as well. We want the community to see what continues to brew with Tacx. That product is not quite ready for the street yet, but we're making progress there with integrating the Tac kernel and otherwise improving the UI and making it a full-fledged Tac product. We'll speak to Tac Server 4.7. The cool thing about Tac Server 4.7 is we're seeing investment in Tac Server from a number of different angles right now. So to include what we're doing at the product center, but also other DoD and government programs that continue to improve Tac Server. And then Wintac has also seen a number of improvements as well, and so we'll speak to that briefly. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and hand it off to our different tech leads on those products, and we'll get started with Atac 4.7. Again, we're having an audio issue here in the room, so we may not be able to hear questions that come up. If you do have questions, throw them out in Teams. You should be able to do that, or if you can't reach us there, put them out in Discord or Slack. If you're calling in, you normally monitor those channels. Just hit us up somewhere, and we'll make sure we answer your question, even if we can't hear it here online. So with that, we'll hand it off to Sean. He's going to go through our updates on Atac 4.7. Sean, over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. So I'm going to go ahead and go through what I do usually, which is the change log. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen in a second, and then we'll go ahead and do a quick demo at the end, and we'll see if there's any questions. So, okay, so everybody should be able to see my screen now. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the change log. The change log has actually been published to the wiki. So if you look under supplemental change logs for Atac, the 4.7 draft is already up there. The things I'm going to go through are fairly fast in terms of release. We've focused on improving quality and continuing to migrate to the Tacx engine. So if you look at kind of the underlying technical debt that was worked off during this release, 4.7 versus 4.6, there's been an increase in work off technical debt that's accrued over the years, and better aligning ourselves to areas of the code that are going to be reused between Atac, Tacx, and Wintac. So I'm going to go ahead and start out with kind of just the kind of the eye candy, the 10,000 foot, what happened. If you ever looked at our change logs that we produce for Atac, they're pretty much the same. So there's export features now for data packages. So when you send something, you used to have to send it to another person to go ahead. You create a data package and send it. Now you can actually export it to a file local to your system and use it. I'm not going to go over really the restart prompt, but a lot of people were installing the mill version, mill plugin for Atac, and they would continue to run in sieve mode until they restarted, and they were like, oh, why didn't you just let me know that I should have restarted before I continued on? So simple things here. One of the bigger ones was the minimum safe distance added to shape radials. So I'm going to go ahead and show this as part of the slide, but then we're going to go ahead and do the actual demo. But it effectively gives you the ability to draw any arbitrary shape and put a minimum safe distance around it. So that's a little bit of that. There's been some native imagery adjustments. So what we've actually been able to do with the Tacx kernel underneath is actually take advantage of a very improved rendering engine for SIB, CADRG, basically your NGA native formats. So in terms of memory consumption, in terms of processor usage, greatly improved. The other thing that's greatly improved is performance at the the higher poles, so closer to the poles on both sides, so the higher latitudes. You'll see actually a great rendering performance with 4.7. So 67th parallel, but people say, well, we're not really interested in that area, but the overall improvements go across the entire world. So associated links was another ask, and what we'll do is I'll do a quick demo of that, but the ability to show associated links with COT messages. So there's a lot of systems out there that are using COT. There's a lot of systems out there that are embedding URLs, and we get questions over a period of time that basically say, well, why can't I just click on those links and bring up a browser and actually look at the associated data. So this was the bigger push for 4.7. So again, it was not feature light, but there was a lot of little feature tweaks here and there, but nothing major, nothing that would require new training. But the bigger ones were security updates. So there were several security scans that were run on Atac over the last couple of release cycles that formulated into a report, and the action was taken to go ahead and resolve those. There were native libraries that had CVEs, critical vulnerabilities assigned to them. There was a further push to remove HTTP throughout the code base, and that obviously has trickle-down ramifications when you're talking about a code base that has that in there. You have to go ahead and look at what that means for users. Does that actually produce a capability gap, and you need to address the gap where appropriate. So as usual with 4.3 and beyond, we've been on the Play Store. The nice thing about that is we go ahead and push out Atac, and we get bug reports. They're not bug reports that are humanly generated, so they're very hard in terms of reproducibility, but they do give us the ability to go ahead and look at these crashes, so the fatal errors that occur, and go ahead and address those. We also do find that we do get reports occasionally from those Google users or the Google Play users, and they find some interesting device configurations that then go ahead and we reproduce the issue and fix the issue. So as part of that, there was both that as well as our open sourced Atac is flourishing in terms of people using it, people going ahead and identifying issues. I'd like to say that there's even some suggested patches that are put in, but we carefully curate those and pull appropriate or recode as appropriate. So with events throughout the world, with international partners on the using the Play Store version of Tac, we're running into things. Primarily larger issues with languages, language packs, language translations, but also the use of sending messages using different keyboard or different alphabets. So in this case, we did correct issues relating to sending of cursor on target messages with acrylic messages. So the software development kit, as usual, does follow that three versions of deprecation policy. So we've identified areas we are deprecated in 4.7. We have gone ahead and deprecated or removed things that were identified back in 4.4 and before. We've refactored code to go ahead and make use of Tac kernel or the kernel, which is the underlying basis for our code share across all the products. And we have focused heavily. If not, we're going to focus more heavily in 4.8, but we focused heavily on automated unit testing. So a lot of that's just listed right in there. The current UAT is out there on both the standalone SDK, which is the Git repo, as well as the SDK is available by Artifactory. The preferred mechanism for downloading and producing plugins right now is using the Artifactory version. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there because again, this is something you can literally read right off of the wiki page, and I'm going to go right into the demos, and we'll see if there's any questions right after that. So I think I'm still good on time. Just see me go right into. Go ahead and see my screen. I'm just going to go ahead and I had a system earlier today send me a bunch of points that had associated URLs. So I'm going to go ahead and pull those up, and you're going to see some those URLs don't exist, but the concept is there is that you're going to get associated links, one or more, and those are valid for everything to include shapes. So you'll see that. Now, I have a shape here. I want to go ahead and start to work minimum safe distance. So you give it a range in your format. So in this case, it's going to be 10. Say, I don't know how big this is, but we're going to go with miles. I think that's a pretty big circle. I'm going to click done. I'm going to enable it, and we're going to go ahead and see that it's probably right out there. So that's your 10-mile radius. So I'm going to move that down to like 1. And you're going to go ahead and see that changes. So that's your minimum safe distance around that circle. Works the same for, I'm going to go ahead and open this up. So you see that rectangle there. I'm going to go ahead and add a minimum safe distance around that. I'm going to go ahead and say that's maybe 500 feet, something more realistic. I'm going to enable it. And we're going to see a 500-foot minimum safe distance around that rectangle. So a little bit of feature adds there. Again, the other thing that I'd like to point out is that there have been UI improvements. Some of them are still backlogged for 4.8. We decided to go ahead and continue to get feedback on those. But one of the things that did make it in, and it's a minor thing, but it does make a lot of difference. There's the ability to change. So for the toggle bar in and out, there's a light and a dark mode for that. So the dark mode is what's by default, which is more used to what you have. The light mode is going to be more of a tan color. The other piece that, again, not very interesting, but something that has been done. So for like, I answered a question every day practically about this is people would see this in the drawing tools or see any of these secondary toolbars and go ahead and say, why can't I use a red X? The red X over on the left-hand side. And it's not a red X, it was the closure button, but MindGrub went back and reworked a really nice system for going ahead and defining closure for a secondary panel. So it's not someone where somebody taps it and thinks they're actually going to drop a red X. So, again, I can pull the Jira tickets and show you that we had about 200 some odd work-offs during this dev cycle. We have added about 200 unit tests between both kernel as well as Atac proper. We have supported streamlining the process for plugin creation. So in your plugin template, what you'll notice is there's no longer a couple different tools. We're working very hard at making sure that when you do Tacx development, when you do Atac development, when you do Wintac development, when you do other development, that we're all talking about the same thing. So we've trying to do things to make it so that there's going to be more capability in the future for the end user, but we have to lay that framework so that we can do that. So I'll stop there and I'll ask if there's any questions, and I'll be happy to answer. All right. Hopefully I didn't put everybody to sleep. I'm going to pass it over to Cassie from the Tacx team.
All right, so I'm going to show you the new updates we have to Tacx. Probably easiest is to switch over to our Tacx roadmap page. So we're still a little bit out of sync on the version numbers. We're not really worried about that yet until we are kind of ready to join the rest of the Tac products and have full feature parity. That's going to happen probably Q2 of next year to align with the 5.0 Tac release that Ryan mentioned. So where we're at right now, we are releasing Tacx 3.3. So again, that coincides with Tac 4.7. We're just coming up on feature freeze, so we still have we're about a month behind. We haven't quite shifted to that 3-month cycle yet. Again, all that will kind of align when we get feature parity. So the big feature updates that we've got coming in 3.3, we've been working on the map engine, on getting off of Whirlwind and onto the Tac map engine. Nothing is actually in the release itself yet for that. It's because as soon as we do that, if it's not done, it's going to break everything. So that's still kind of off on a side feature branch where we're investigating and making those changes. But we've made really good progress there, and we're going to continue to work on that. When developers and users are actually going to start seeing that map engine is that next release that's going to come out at the end of the year in December. The features that you will actually see in 3.3 is an updated look and feel. So we replaced the legacy look and feel. If you're not familiar with that term, it's basically just how it renders the UI. So, whether they're curved or straight, what borders there are, what colors it uses, things like that. How fast things zoom in and out, or, if you expand a panel, like, is it animated? Things like that. That's what your look and feel is. So we've updated that to be a little bit more modern and also to allow us to align with Atac. So hopefully when I demo this here in a second, you'll start to see that the colors are matching what we've got in the new Atac UI. And then the other feature that we've got, and we're still just finishing it up, we should have it done by that code freeze on August 1st, is route creation and editing. I'll show you route creation. Route editing is still in code review right now, so we should have that shortly. And then just while I'm on this page, the next release, again, for us, our numbers are still out of sync, but it's 3.4 for us. We're calling that our developer beta, and what we mean by that is we're committing to get as many of the API changes that we expect ironed out for that release So that's a good time for any plugin developers to come and start grabbing Tacx and updating your plugins. You know, I know some people already are, and that's fine. But if you do it right now, you're still probably going to have some more breaking changes that you're going to have to address. So if you're willing to, you know, come along with us and keep fixing some breaking changes, by all means, join us now. But if you want to just update once and be ready to go, that's when you're going to want to do that, is in that 3.4 release. And you can kind of see there's a pretty extensive list of things that we're hoping to get into that. The blue starred items are our highest priority, and then the other ones, we're going to pursue all of those, but you know, if anything has to slip, some of those might fall into the final release. So that's what we're looking at for the release coming out right now, and then also our next release. So let me flip over to Tacx and demo. So here we have Tacx. If you are familiar with either RaptorX or, you know, some of the early Tacx releases, hopefully you'll start to see that it's looking a little bit different. Again, we got that new look and feel, which it's subtle, but it does feel a little bit more modern. The UIs are, you know, not quite as dated. You know, think the older versions of Word, things like that, is how it used to look. One of the big changes that we had to do as far as changing that look and feel is our ribbon bar that we had was actually a component that was part of the old look and feel, so we had to rewrite it from scratch. And when we did that, we lost some of the nice features that the old one had. So if you're familiar with like Word and Excel, you know, when you shrink down your ribbon bar in one of those tools, it'll actually make some of these icons smaller and things like that to collapse it. We could do that. What we decided to do for now that we thought would be a better UI is go ahead and keep icons the same size and add just a little overflow drop down on the side here. So if your ribbon bar can't fit all the icons in, they'll overflow to the side. And so actually if I collapse this over a little bit, you'll see, okay, there's way more in there now, and it's dynamic, it adjusts really well. So if I drag that out just a little bit, we'll get a few more, you know, out on the ribbon bar and not in there. So that's where your overflow icons will go. I have one more feature that I'm going to work as soon as I get back from travel this week, and that is to make these labels optional, so that if you want kind of an Atac style toolbar where it's just icons up here and you're familiar with the icons and you know what they mean, you'll be able to turn those labels off. Or if you have a little bit more vertical real estate and you want the icons on top and the labels below, that'll be an option too. So don't quite have that yet, but we'll have that ready to go before feature freeze. So that's kind of the new UI. Again, as I mentioned, you know, the colors are starting to be more consistent with the Atac coloring. You can see kind of those tan colors that Atac is using now. Still got a little bit of fine tuning that we have to do, but definitely starting to get something that looks a lot closer to some of the other products. So now the other feature that we added, and I'll go ahead and return to full screen there, is route editing. So Tacx and RaptorX always had shapes. So, you know, just like you can do in Atac and Wintac, you can create shapes and draw, you know, lines and things like that. So you could kind of draw a route, but it didn't recognize itself as a route. It was just, you know, a polyline, right? So if I do one of those right here and exit out of it, it's just a line. When it goes over COT, it doesn't see itself as a route or anything like that. And so what we did now is actually add a separate route editor, and we modeled it off of Wintac. So if you're a Wintac user, hopefully this will feel very familiar. So we've got a routes button right up here at the top of the ribbon bar, and you can click on that to open that routes panel. Right now I already had one drawn, so you can see it's showing that there. Again, we're still working on that, so that's why some of these buttons are still disabled in my screen, trying to get the editing in, and that's still in code review. Just like in Wintac, you click that plus button, you can select what color you want it to be, you can select some of these metadata fields. Again, if you're familiar with creating routes in Wintac or Atac, none of these should be surprising to you. You know, you can change the order of whether ascending or descending on the control points. As soon as you click OK, it's going to enter the drawing mode, and just like in Wintac, you can single click to drop control points or double click to create a named waypoint. You can kind of see, again, very similar to experience that hopefully you're used to. We'll get those created, and then when you end, There you go. So now we have a route. We can show and hide visibility here on the side, just like you can in Wintac and Atac. Some of the editing is there right now. So for instance, if I select this route, I can move some of the control points. We're working on the piece to fix all the rest of it and be able to edit from this menu right here. So that's what we've got going as far as routes. And then the last feature that we added, or I wouldn't say feature, but the last thing that we did for 3.3, Sean mentioned the security enhancements that they did in Atac. Tacx also went through some security scanning, so it's nothing that you're going to see or experience on the user side, but we also had, I think, 3 findings, and we have addressed all of those, and so those will be resolved in the 3.3 release. Very similar issues to what Sean pointed out, things like hard-coded security strings like passwords. So that's what we've got coming for everybody in 3.3. So I'll pause there. If there are any questions, hopefully we'll be able to see those in chat. I do have volume on, so if you speak, I should be able to hear you. All right, if there's no questions, I'm going to pass it over to Joe McKettrick with Tacx Server. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Cassie. Okay, I'm going to run through the latest updates for Tacx Server 4.7. So starting off with data feeds. So data feeds is the mechanism for bringing in external data into Tacx Server from another system. So we added group filtering for data feeds. So that applies for the 2 ways that data feeds actually can be imported into Tacx Server. So you have streaming data feeds and plugin based data feeds. So group filtering is a mechanism for segmenting groups of data within Tacx generally, and so we added that capability to do that for both the streaming data feeds and plugin data feeds. We saw some large improvements in CPU utilization for data feed brokering of over 60% through optimizing the code paths there. And added a simple default mechanism for data feeds where if another group is not specified for the feed, it'll just be sent to the anon group, which is the default for other any data generally that's not specified for groups. So we applied that to data feeds too. We developed some caching mechanisms to be able to send a snapshot of data feed information for both plugin data feeds and streaming data feeds when a subscriber to a mission first connects, so that they would not need to wait for the next update. And we added the ability to to filter the data feed according to the polygon that's defined to geofilter the mission that a data feed is part of. So next up on 4.7, we have a lot of improvements in the SDK that are pretty exciting for integrating with system. So many of you are familiar with the APIs in Tacx Server for managing files and missions, the Mission API, the Enterprise Sync API. So we developed a way to utilize those from plugins, so that a plugin developer can interact with missions or upload files, process files that are submitted to a plugin from submitted to Tacx Server and destined for a plugin. So this really, kind of opens up the space for using the writing custom code in a Tacx Server plugin that can use a mission. So this has been applied for a number of integrations so far, and we're pretty excited about that. Let's see, the plugin SDK jar has been simplified so that it has a much lower footprint in terms of the number of dependencies that are there. So that just gives us a cleaner integration when you're developing Tacx Server plugins. So we removed dependencies from that, like gRPC, Netty, etc. a sort of a minor update, but important in the configuration. The plugin enable flag that you may have seen is now no longer needed, so we remove that from the configuration, and you'll see a link in the changelog for the updated SDK, which is currently pointing to the develop branch, but as soon as we release, we'll point that to the master branch, which is how the SDK is structured. In the Tacx server admin UI, we've developed a new API and then an admin UI front end to that to specify classification levels. So this is not full support for classification of data through our Tacx server, but it just gives you a way as an admin to simply declare what the classification level is for the server, and so that's used by a few plugins, in particular the MCS Scott plugin. Some other minor updates are also important. Just things like making sure that the counts work and some of the metrics for inputs for counting messages and things like that. We added a place in the admin configuration to specify the maximum file size for files that are uploaded into Tacx server. And then next, moving on to the mission API, some of these are more technical in nature, but for those who are deeply interested in the mission API, it's good to know about these. So support for external data when changing values, adding the capability to process map layer changes and mission feed adds in the mission request body. So that just relates to the semantics for the mission API, where you can, when you're using the API to create a mission, you can include a full JSON payload or use specific attributes to just utilize the API in the most idiomatic way for your plugin, or for the way that you're integrating with the API, whether it's a plugin or an external service. Some other APIs in the server, the mission package, data package, and enterprise sync APIs have all been refactored to use streams for uploads. So this just lets Tacx server use a lot much less RAM when there's a lot of concurrent uploads happening at the same time, rather than keeping the full binary payload for a file in memory. It's instead using a stream to accomplish that, so it's a lot more efficient. The enrollment endpoint now supports XML as well as JSON in the V2 version of that. Data packages have been set to a maximum size of 550 megabytes. That's due to a restriction in Postgres, so with potential to increase that in future, but we also set the default to the current maximum of 550 to support that size for files. In the client error logs capability, we've added an email notification, a way to send email notifications when feedback is uploaded. So that's not by default. So that requires some additional configuration if you'd like to enable that. We have a whole bunch of dependency updates for important third-party libraries we have. So this just brings in improvements in all these libraries, and especially security updates. So that includes some of the libraries that are part of Tacx server, including Apache Ignite, Spring, Loudback, Netty, gRPC, and some others that you'll see listed on the page for the changelog. Number of bug fixes here, and I won't delve into the details for each of these, but these include things like out-of-memory exceptions, improving really more, it's a bug fix, but also an optimization where if a client is sort of sending data when we don't expect it to, in the authentication flow for one of the auth methods, we will close the connection when it's clear that invalid data is being sent, rather than holding that open and waiting for it. Some other things here. So happy to answer questions about the bugs, but they're listed in the changelog. For xcheck, permissions to ensure that the checklist creator is subscribed with the owner role. On the authentication, API for Tacx server, we've updated this default CRL to 730 days to match a validity period. And for containerization, pretty significant change there is that we now have hardened images that use Iron Bank Docker-based images to to build the Tacx server containers on top of that. So that also includes a more robust method for adding another container for the to contain the security materials like the CA that that you can use to build your own security domain. That's now in its own Docker container, which lets us segregate the materials like private keys and other more sensitive parts of the PKI infrastructure there within its own container, and then just move the parts of the pieces that are necessary into the Tacx server container for execution. So for federation, we added support for COP federation, common operating picture federation, federated data feeds, updating the data feed behavior for federated data feeds to match local data feeds, increasing the maximum message size, added some asynchronicity for file federation, and some kind of matching up some of the configuration for emission federation disruption tolerance to match some of the configuration there where things are disabled or enabled, to make sure that is all lining up. We added a number of automated tests. This is more on the development side, but really key for keeping consistent quality in the product. Unit tests, startup tests for integration, and on the cluster, we adapted the Kubernetes config map to contain the core config. So this is kind of a more idiomatic usage of Kubernetes, and also lets us support some of the work that's currently ongoing to support automated integration tests for the cluster. On the database, there's it does its best effort with the schema manager to fix the schema if there's an error. This was to kind of address a bit of a mismatch between the open source version and then the signed RPM version that's available on tac.gov to and that's for 4.5 to make sure that if the schema is slightly different, that it will be fixed, and that really only applies to some comments that were in the files. And there's some updates here for WebTac as well. Layers tool has been refactored and updated. DTED elevation support for the user's cursors and the footer has been added. COT streamer tool for evaluating message stream and individual messages. Preferences for units and labels, and another preference for displaying lat long grid lines on the map. So that's the overview of the changes in 4.7. So happy to answer any questions now.
So a major update, this is Ryan again, major update with Tacx server. This cycle as we did open source it. This is not so much driven by world events and other nations wanting to use Tacx server. This is actually driven by the desire to get Tacx server as a monolith container into DoD Iron Bank, which allows Tacx server to be used freely in joint all domain command and control, or JADC2 implementations. So we're really excited about that. We're going to keep open sourcing products as the capacity of our staff at Product Center allows. So more to follow there, but that was a really big development. So if you're out there and you're using either the container image that's now available on tac.gov, or if you're working off of what we've made available on GitHub and we'll maintain there, certainly feedback welcome. If there are things that don't quite align with expectations, we want to know about those things so we can fix them over the course of the forthright release. But bravo, Joe. We're real bullish on making Tacx server continually better and continually more scalable for the community. We'll hand it over, barring any questions on audio here. We'll hand it over to Wintac first. Any questions on Tacx server? Okay, we'll hand it over to Jeremy for Wintac.
Right. So some changes that are coming along with Wintac in 4.7. We got new builds can now be installed over builds. We also have additional language support, Ukrainian and Polish translations. I've got an image here. This is a virtual machine I've got one.
Hey guys, Jeremy's audio is really weak. I don't know if you can turn that up, or Jeremy, if you can lean in a bit.
All right, sorry. Apparently there's all right. Any better now with the volume? I apologize.
It's not any better. It's still weak.
1 second. Sorry. Okay. I apologize. Any better now? Chance? Check.
It's still coming in weak.
Confirmation on volume.
Volume's still low.
All right, I could loop back. If there's anything.
I don't know, Cassie or Joe, if one of you guys could get your laptop over towards Jeremy and just open your mic, and we'll work off of that one possibly.
Yeah, great idea, Charlie.
All right, guys, apologize. Quick mic check.
Got you loud and clear. Thanks.
All right, no problem. Thank you. All right, so one of the things coming 4.7, we've got new builds can be installed over old builds. We've also got additional language support for both Ukrainian and Polish translations. One thing to note is that this is going to be set not from the installer, but on the operating system level. So if you need to change this for any reason, then you could simply change it at the OS level and then restart your Wintac. I've got a virtual machine up to demonstrate the translation. This is for Ukrainian. Just a quick example. We've also got a new feature for user feedback. So if you have an issue in Wintac and you'd like to report it to the Tacx server folks and also get CC'd on an email yourself, there is a workflow that you can access from the top left hamburger drop-down menu, and it'll open up this modal dialog where you can input a variety of fields to send that ticket up to the server. Some of the categories that you can select from are connectivity, account, bug report, and other. Once you select a category, you'll get some sub-issue types to select from, and as long as you have an issue description inputted into this field here, the send button will become enabled, and you can send that along its way. You can also attach files and choose whether or not you want to send logs as well. And this is an example that I created earlier. So you'll get an email with all the fields, the data from the fields that you've inputted during that dialogue session. Additionally, we now have support for video recording and broadcasting if you have a streaming source that supports it, specifically for a UDP or RTSP stream. Once that is recorded, it will go into your videos, Wintac, and video recordings folder. And the workflow to accomplish that would be by simply going into the video player pane, and there are now recording and broadcasting buttons that are available. And if you do have a supported streaming source to hook into, they will become enabled. Some of the settings for those options can also be configured through the tool preferences and video preferences. You can customize the broadcast address and port, the re-encoding behavior, and the bit and frame rates. Additionally, Wintac now supports synchronizing your Wintac time with an external GPS source's time. So the way that you would do that is by going to My Preferences, GPS Preferences, and there's a Use GPS Time option in here as well now. We also have support for additional icon sets, specifically GeoOps Wildfire, and you would access them through the point dropper as you would with any other of our icon sets in core. We also fixed an issue where certain NMEA messages from GPS sources weren't being recognized by Wintac. And there is also a new marker sheets plugin that at a very high level will allow users to take a CSV file with data that maps to fields on a marker, and you can import it into Wintac through drag and drop. You can import it into Wintac through this drop down option up here. You would simply take a CSV file, for example, drag it, and you'll have an option to import as a marker sheet. And once you do so, it'll appear in this doc pane. Well, quick note is that this plugin is still a work in progress, and there's some features that still do need to be fleshed out. However, once you have your sheet imported into the plugin, it will appear like so, and the columns here will mimic the columns that are provided in the CSV. There are a few columns that are provided by default, like the time that the column was last changed, and the location, in case of a valid location couldn't be recognized from the CSV file itself. For example, in the file that I just uploaded, there was a malformed latitude column. You can also specify the type of each marker within the file once it's imported. So if you double click on the type cell, for example, you'll get the same dialog that pops up elsewhere in Wintac to change marker types, and you could select from all the icon sets that you have available and load it into Wintac. Likewise, if you want to change the location, for example, you would double click on this cell and it would open up a dialog very similar to the go-to dialog where you could make those changes as well. We also support with this plugin synchronization between Tacx server missions and feeds, data sync feeds that is. So in order to do that currently, again, this is still a work in progress. Not everything is completely automatic, but you could manually push a notion of a sheet to a Tacx server or a feed. And I have data sync loaded up right now, so I will show you what that would look like within a feed. So I've got a feed right now where this decimal degree CSV is uploaded, and so it can stay in sync through a feed this way as well. And you can also add it to a feed from the feed itself. There is a marker sheet option that is currently disabled, and I will look into that. But at a high level, that just about covers the current state of this plugin, which is, again, a work in progress. So if there are any questions, happy to take them. Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, that wraps up our 4.7 release sequence. You'll notice that we didn't cover Atac or Wintac. That's certainly not out of disregard for those products. Atac and WebTac are being developed entirely by stakeholders outside the Tech Product Center. So while we do facilitate the release of those products, we're more loosely coupled with them. So Atac 2.1, we'll say, is definitely out on the streets in the App Store. So update if you haven't already, and give us feedback on that. If we can't solve a problem for you, we'll relay the issue to people who can. But we're excited about the continued maturation of Atac, and we know that's making a difference for people. I think last we checked, we had close to, or maybe now over, 5,000 downloads, which is really significant given that it was only released on 7 April. WebTac continues to make big strides as well. WebTac, Tacx, Wintac, VRTac, these things are all in the hopper for open source. So we do have a stated goal to, over the next, let's say, year, to really continue open sourcing products. We know this has been for the community, but it's also beneficial for us. If we can make those products open source, we can get broader feedback on the software products themselves and continue to improve those in the open, which we strive to do, is strive for transparency and making the products better with the community's input. So feel free to drop any questions in Mattermost, Discord, Slack, wherever you are. We've got a limitation with Teams and chat, but we're going to make sure have a platform that is chat friendly for the 4.8 feature release in October. That said, we're going to sign off from here in Rome, New York. We are host here at AFRL, Air Force Research Laboratory, where Atac was born, and the Innovare facility and the Griffiths Institute. Awesome host this week for our developers conference, and more to follow on timing for the next release cycle in October. We're out here. Everybody stay safe out there and keep using Atac. Thanks. See ya.
Thank you, guys.